welcome everyone. We start our interview with Alex. We already present him as a co-founder of Codepen. So we're gonna start with the first question. Before going inside the Codepen, we want to know a little bit more about him and his background and how, what is his story, how he became an entrepreneur. So tell us.
So first of all, just thank you for having me here in your coding school. I really appreciate it. Real honor to be here and get to meet coders in Barcelona. I am from the United States. I grew up in Florida. My parents are immigrants from Puerto Rico. So I hablo español, pero puertorriqueño, no catalán, y no de España. Es muy impropiado el español mío. But so I grew up in the United States. I went to a local school. When I started, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So at the beginning, I thought I'd be doing computer science. But after talking to some of the people there, I ended up taking a major that's kind of half business, half Java or programming. And I learned a little bit of programming in school, but I didn't really learn how to program as a craft during that time. At the time, things were a lot more strict. The entrepreneurship was kind of starting to take off. And I ended up joining kind of a big organization after college. I joined the federal government in the United States and programmed there for 4 years in very old languages and another language. I also learned a bit of Java. After that, I knew I didn't want to do that. I knew one day I wanted to kind of start my own company. So I met another gentleman there. His name is Tim Sabat, who I currently work with today. But while I was there, we started working for a small startup in the Tampa Bay area called Wufoo.com. While I was there, I learned to do all kinds of things. I really learned to program for the first time in that small environment because, as you guys may know, in a small company, you end up having to do everything. And I really feel like that's where I got my education, was by actually doing the work. After that, the company got acquired, and I ended up leaving the company that acquired Wufoo after 2 years, and I started the company, I started Codepen with my friend Tim Sabat and another friend of mine, Chris Coyer, that I had worked with at the previous company. So the entire time that it took me from leaving school, where I knew I wanted to start some sort of business and thinking about it and hoping that I had the skill, but I had never convinced myself that I was ready to do it, either financially or with my skill set. It took me about 9 years before I actually jumped into starting Codepen. So at that point, I was lucky enough to have friends in tech, and I was lucky enough to feel confident that I had the skills, even though I very quickly found out I didn't know everything I thought I knew when I started Codepen. But I've been running Codepen with 2 other guys, Chris and Tim, for about 5 years now. And we're a team of 8 and still really excited and still working on Codepen every day. So I feel really lucky to be able to do the work that we really love and care about every day, and to be able to choose what kind of a product that we develop that we hope makes people really happy and teaches people a lot about coding and lets them share their work all over the world. So it's been pretty exciting. It hasn't always been amazing, or it hasn't always been easy to do the work we're doing, but I feel really fortunate to have gotten to this point where we actually have employees and we have people who really care about Codepen. That's the most amazing thing, is that after 5 years, people still really care about it. So it's really beautiful to see something like that grow up into something that supports the community and is supported by the community.
Before continuing, I would like to ask you guys, do you all know what is Codepen? There is nobody that, you all know. Okay. So, we arrived at the point that you starting as an entrepreneur and you start doing Codepen. What was the first MVP? What was the original idea behind Codepen? How did you start it?
So it's interesting because when we started Codepen, it wasn't supposed to be a business. Codepen was supposed to be a weekend project that we would finish in about a month. And I knew I wanted to start something. I didn't know what it was. And I was pretty sure that once we finished Codepen, that was just kind of like a fun thing that I was doing with a friend. We would actually start a real business. And we were lucky enough that it picked up enough traction that we still continue working on it to this day, and it's still not even close to finished. But what happened was I still have a really good friend that I run Codepen with, and his name's Chris Coyer. Chris Coyer has been writing about CSS and design for a long time. And in preparing for this, I actually looked up the email that he sent us. He was like, hey, I want to create examples of code, because one of the things what he does on his blog is he teaches people about CSS and HTML and design and JavaScript. And so he's like, I'm tired of uploading files to like an FTP server just so I can show off kind of like a small little demonstration of my work. And so he sent an email to me, Tim, and a couple other developer friends of ours. And he was like, I want to do this thing, but I don't really have all the skills that I need. Would you guys be interested in doing that? And when we got that email, we were like, sure, we'll hang out a couple weekends, put this thing together. And when we put it together, we would always find other things that we wish it would do. We were like, well, it'd be nice if you could do this. It'd be nice if you could follow other people's work. And because Chris had such a big following, he already started using Codepen. So one of the things that we ended up getting a lot of feedback instantly from the community. And so we just kept working on it, and at that point, it was very basic. It was just kind of like you could put HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and I knew that I could run it, and I ran it completely insecurely. We ran it all like on one server. You could steal cookies, you could steal accounts, but it ran and people were happy with it, so we just kind of kept developing Codepen at the time. So that's kind of like the really basic, simple version of Codepen that we started with. And because we've got so much feedback, we just kind of always kept working on it.
Nice. So after you start with this basic version of Codepen, you having your MVP. How did it evolve? Where did you find actually the finance to become what you are now, what you are Codepen? Like, what was the evolution of Codepen after this begin?
Yeah, so it's interesting because for a long time, I just kept thinking, okay, if once we do these next few things, we're gonna like set this thing aside and we're gonna do some like business app, like accounting app, or just something that we could be like, this is why you should pay us money. And one of the things that happened was I started talking to a really good friend of mine. He was one of the founders of Wufoo, and I was talking to him because I had just attended a General Assembly course. And one of the things that happened there was I went to this course in San Francisco where I lived at the time, and it was a 3-hour class. We all paid like $75 for 3 hours to learn this like JavaScript framework that was like interesting at the time. And we spent about an hour of that 3 hours trying to set up our environment so that he could like teach us. And that's where I was like, I'm over here, we're sitting in front of computers, and he's trying to set up a projector as if, it's like 1992. And at the time it was like 2015, or I don't know, 2012 or something like that. And so that was what convinced me personally that if Codepen could help people like us just focus on the learning, focus on the technology, on learning the technology instead of setting it up, that maybe this is something that would be viable as a business. That was what convinced me that that was something I should do as an entrepreneur versus this is just something that I'm doing with my friends. And lucky enough, my two co-founders were interested in just continuing to work on Codepen. So at that point, we started thinking about it like differently. We started saying, okay, people are obviously interested in Codepen. They're using it for free, and people love free products, but that's not going to let us pay the bills. So at the time, we kind of scratched together what we thought would be really interesting as far as pro features. We ended up coming up with 5 reasons that we could sell Codepen as a subscription service. For whatever reason, through chance, I've always worked in web applications that are freemium models. So meaning that we give away 99% of our users use Codepen for free. 99% of the users at Wufoo used Wufoo for free. But you get a certain number of people that actually want to pay you money either to support you or they want to use the pro features. So we ended up deciding, okay, if we can have these 5 pro features, we're going to try to sell this. And if this thing sells, maybe this is something that we could do as an actual business. At the time, we all had full-time jobs. So it's not like I left my job and said, we're going to make Codepen work regardless. I was like, I have too many bills to be able to just leave. So for a long time, we ended up just working on the 2. And we were lucky enough that people paid for it. Enough people paid for it to the point where we convinced ourselves, okay, maybe this is something we could do full time.
Nice. So during you start your project, while you were doing your project, what was the hardest thing you have to deal with? Which one was your, you reach a break point when you start saying okay, now, it's a challenge for me. What was the hardest thing you have done as an entrepreneur?
I would say there's 2 different things. The first is the hardest thing in the beginning for us was convincing people that they should pay for Codepen because our competitors were free. And so people would be like, why am I going to pay you $9? They're like, I pay $8 for Netflix. Why should I trust this small company with my data, my money, if you guys could be acquired and you'll close down tomorrow? That was really hard in the beginning. And so our only answer for a question like that was, we have always worked on products on the internet. That is what we do. Chris has always done it. I have always done it. Tim has always done it. We aren't looking to sell Codepen. We aren't looking to flip Codepen. And we're not looking to sell your data. So we can't guarantee anybody that we're going to be around forever. But we can guarantee you that we're going to try to be around forever. And we're going to make the best effort of it. And so we're lucky enough that people trusted us. Now, I would say the most difficult thing long-term as an entrepreneur is the fact that we've gotten to a size where you have to now stop doing some of the things you love because you need to run your business like a business, which means that every one of the Codepen founders is super nice. I'm really lucky to work with incredibly nice, sweet people. But the problem is sometimes as an entrepreneur, you have to make really difficult decisions. You have to talk about money, which can be stressful. And you have to talk about not having enough money, which is really stressful. It's like, where do you spend it? Where does it go? And what do we do if we don't get to where we think we need to be to survive as a company? And so in doing that, we've had to embrace a lot of things that I hated, a lot of project management tasks, keeping track of what people are doing, being really critical with ideas. When we first started, we were just kind of do whatever we were interested in doing. And now we put a lot more thought into what we do because we know that it has to have a real financial impact for us as a company. Because now we're responsible for us, but we're also responsible for everyone else. So we are all tech nerds, and we want to do the thing that's cool, the thing that's fun to do. I just got done with 6 months of rewriting our billing system, and it's just been, for me personally, super boring, a nightmare, but it makes us a lot more money and is a lot better. And I still hate every minute of it, But you do it because there's a bunch of other people that depend on you, and it's hard to just agree that, okay, I'm going to do this very boring thing because it's going to help us to do or it's going to help other people do really fun things, like continue to work on Codepen that they care about. But if I don't do the boring thing, other people can't do the fun things. So you just have to understand that this is what you have to do, whatever you have to do to do right by the people that are supporting Codepen. And that doesn't just mean employees, that doesn't just mean the people who pay their, who own the company. That means all these people who trusted us in year 1 and are still posting pens in year 5. Like, that's amazing. And so you can't do the fun thing because you have to make sure that Codepen as a company keeps running. So that's, for me, that's been the hardest adjustment, because I'm just like a total tech geek, and I love building software. It's like my favorite thing.
And that's actually what I think is the cool thing. I mean, you were before doing Codepen, you were a coder. You were defining you as a coder. And now your mindset changed to an entrepreneur. Like, you would define yourself more as an entrepreneur. I mean, you are both right now. You're doing entrepreneur and coding at the same time. But when you start, you were just a coder coming like from a university or from other projects. And now you start your own project. Yeah. Which is what we are trying to say at Wagon. We are trying to say like that as a coder nowadays you can start your startup, and you have to feel powerful, because right now like know how to code is a kind of like superpower, let's say, and it makes you create like something, and you come up with something that is personally thinking amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so I like to think that I'm kind of like a product-based coder, and that I really, really care about the product, right? And so that's like, sounds super generic. You're like, okay, you care about the product, sure you do, like whatever. But like, what does that mean? That means that you do customer service, that you talk to people who use your product, and that you actually really care about why they're using it, how they're using it, and the problems that they're having when they're spending their time using your product, right? As much as I love the tech, a lot of times like users use your tech because you're saving them from a lot of tedium and a lot of like wasted time on their end. You're improving something that they can probably already do themselves in some way, but is really manual or really boring and tedious. So by you building that product, you get to make something that helps them in their lives, right? And that's a really amazing opportunity. You know, a lot of times you're going to meet a lot of people in tech, and you're going to feel like everyone in the world can code. Everyone can create the thing that I can create, because you forget that programming is still a little bit of a superpower, right? I like to think of it as like you're creating this like amazing machine that works for you, right? Initially, you start the machine, it's super basic, it doesn't really do much, but you keep building it, you keep putting effort into it, you keep making it work a little bit better every day. And after hours and hours and thousands of hours of effort being put into this thing, you have something that makes people's lives a lot easier. And I love the idea of being able to do that, and having that ability is absolutely amazing. With the tech that you guys are learning here, I've talked to Francesco a lot about the tech that you guys are learning, whether it's JavaScript, Rails. Like, when I started programming at Wufu, you had to buy physical servers, right? That means you had to have $10,000, $15,000. When we started Codepen, we rented servers from AWS, and we were just doing everything for free. And if we had more traffic, we just rented more servers, and it's just magically all the performance problems can go away. So you're getting into this era where more and more people can create more and more products, which a lot of times can seem like daunting, because it's like, well, everything's been done, right? It can feel that way. It's like, oh, everything's been done. And then you see someone come out with a new idea, and you're like, wow, that's amazing.
That's never, I mean, right now, like, according to Alex, like, coding is just the start, just the begin. We are entering inside, like, we are starting like a new time where coding is going to be a new language for us, and we're going to like create our own things like through the code. And that's why I think like Codepen is a great tool we should use, because it helps coders to create their things. And I would like to ask you one thing, because I promised you to ask this thing. I would like to ask you which language did you use to create Codepen? And why did you use that one?
So it's interesting. When we started the company, we all had knowledge in Java, Python, PHP, JavaScript. And I have no idea what reason. I think it's because we started the idea with like, oh, let's learn something interesting and new. So we ended up choosing Ruby on Rails.
Thank you.
Which ended up honestly being one of the best decisions. And the reason for me personally is that the community around Ruby is really good about creating high quality and like libraries, right? So it's like a language isn't just, oh, I like the way this language works individually. Like that is, I would say that's like 10% of it. A huge part of a language is all the library dependencies, all the tools that you have at your disposal. And as someone who's worked in PHP, JavaScript, mumps, Python, I love Ruby more than any other language because the libraries seem to be so high quality. For whatever reason, the community just decided that they're going to only pick a few projects and really support those. And so when you end up depending on a library in Ruby, you tend to feel like it's a really high quality, well-documented project, right? And because of that reason, I almost feel like one of the biggest benefits to choosing like this very common framework is the fact that almost every question you have has been answered by some other expert. And it's absolutely amazing. And it's not one of those things that's obvious when you first start using the language, but when you're super frustrated and it's been 6 hours and your Google search turns into like a paragraph, it feels amazing to find an answer.
There is no Stack Overflow that might help you.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing to find an answer to that question. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with Ruby. I think we're going to stick with it for a very long time.
Thank you for this answer. We want to hear that.
That was an honest answer.
So back to Codepen. The question is, what is Codepen now? I mean, what are you doing now with Codepen? Where Codepen is going? And I mean, what is your idea, like how to make Codepen a better service?
So, you know, Codepen's, it's always been about learning from other people and being able to quickly get your ideas out to other people, right? Like when we started Codepen, you couldn't publish an entire website. It was just like a pen, which is basically a single web page, right? We now have the ability to create full-on projects in Codepen, which means you can create an entire website, publish it, and all that stuff. But as you guys are learning and finding out, there's so many tools, so much technology out there. And we are still in a point where we're continuing to figure out how can we make it easier for someone to focus not on the setup, not on the like installing this library or installing this dependency, but how can we get them working in that environment as quickly as possible. So I actually was at a meetup in Miami for Codepen. I attend a lot of Codepen meetups. And so one of the best examples that I got was from talking to a guy there, and he said that, he's like, you know, it's weird that in tech, the guy or the girl who sets up the project is also the one that programs it. And he goes, one of the things that is interesting is that he's like, I'm a musician. He's like, when I go to play music, I like that I have a sound engineer that like sets up all the instruments, you know? And that person is making sure that everything's tuned right, everything's set up, and then the musician comes in and plays music. They just focus on that aspect of it. And so one of the things that I've personally been thinking about Codepen is like, how can Codepen be your sound engineer so that you can just play music, that you can just focus on creating the product that you want to create without having to worry about setting up your environment and doing all these things. How can we help you do that so that you're focusing on building the example, the demo, or the full website, and you don't have to fight the tools. So we're continuing to work on that effort. I don't think that is ever going to be 100% solved, but we want to make it easier so that you can do that, so that Codepen's a tool for learning and not a tool that you get frustrated with, not something that you ever worry about having to set up and manage and things like that. We all have to do that at some point, but if Codepen can save you 15 minutes on a 20-minute task, that's our goal. We've accomplished that. You know, you can share that work, you can learn from other people. That's what we're hoping to make Codepen.
Alex, we have a projector and we have the computer, and we have the co-founder of Codepen. And it would be nice if the co-founder of Codepen can introduce us Codepen.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll do my best.
Applause, please.
Yep. All right, cool. So this is Codepen as you see it today. We have the pens are still like kind of the major thing that you create on Codepen. We end up, when you come to Codepen, you see a lot of kind of like the very flashy examples and things like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's all that's on there. That's just a lot of what ends up getting featured. But it's still very cool because you can learn a lot of techniques from the people on Codepen. I have to say that most of the things these days that are created on Codepen aren't things that I have the ability to make. I mostly have the ability to make Codepen these days. But it's really impressive, the talent that is being shown off and the skills that people are kind of teaching each other. Tiffany Rayside's definitely one of my favorite developers on Codepen. You see she's kind of like customized her whole profile here. But it all looks very flashy, but the cool thing is we try to always feature the code. You know, everything that the developers are creating is something that you can look at. If you look at this pen, it's very small. It's like 90 lines of code in her HTML. And everything, no matter how complicated it seems on the web or in software, is just something that can be broken down into much smaller components that all of us can understand. So I think that's kind of the beauty of Codepen, is we try to isolate and simplify as much as possible so that you can learn from other people. You know, the newest features on Codepen these days is the ability to create an entire project. So instead of having to put all your code inside of like three of the panes, you can create multiple files, and you can run Babel on them if you want to use like the latest JavaScript and things like that. So that's kind of the new thing that we're focusing on at Codepen, is making it easier for developers to create entire websites, publish them, and share more complex solutions to more complex problems, and really show off what it's like to create a full website. So that's what Codepen is. There's tons of examples on there. Like I said, if you're doing things like, I know you guys are going to be filling out forms soon. That's going to be a big deal in your life. They did it already, perfect. You know, if you need to learn about JavaScript validation or how to send data across the network, tons of forms. I know that when you go on the website, you see a lot of flashy examples and things like that, but you end up learning tons from just the basic sign-up forms. We always try to give you the most interesting, popular results so that you can see very high-quality examples like you see here. But that's basically Codepen. We try to make it easy for people to share and follow each other's work.
Do you guys have blog posts about how to sign up?
You might ask for a question if you want, if I allow you.
No, I was just asking if you guys have blog posts about. Sorry. I was asking if you guys have blog posts where you can learn about how to submit a form and the data involved.
Yeah, we do have some blog posts. Another thing that we try to do is, it's not something that we built out as much as trying to publish pens and projects and things, but we built out blog posts not so that we could have kind of general Medium style blog posts or Tumblr style blog posts. For everything on Codepen is always focused around creating code examples and explaining them. So one of the things that we also do is we kind of give you a blog on Codepen, so that if you don't have a blog set up and you want to create those examples and explain something with just plain words, you have the ability to do that. You have the ability to include the examples in the blog post. And we just try to make it very simple. Like you see here, they've embedded this Codepen example inside of their blog post. And you can embed these examples inside of your own personal websites and things like that. But if you don't have that, you can still write about it on Codepen. And so that's kind of like why we created a blog post. We try to make it as easy as possible to kind of share your ideas and examples with anyone, really.
Thank you for the presentation, Alex. I'm pretty sure those beautiful people, they have a lot of questions for you. So if you're open to questions, guys, let me know. Leah is actually our student. She's very smart.
Are there any licensing rules, or can other developers take people's work and incorporate it into products that they want to build commercially?
Right, so that was actually one of the first decisions that we had to make, because it ended up being very questionable. At the moment, when you create something on Codepen, everything's MIT licensed, which basically means you can do everything and anything you want with it. You just can't sue the creator, right? You don't even have to give attribution to the original creator on Codepen. We think it's very nice if you do, if you just like kind of put in the comments, this was taken from this example. But there's no licensing issues as far as putting it in a commercial product, selling it, or anything like that. That's just by default. We've said, if you put something on Codepen, it's MIT licensed. Cool.
First, thank you very much for the talk.
Yeah.
I have a question more regarding the entrepreneurial way you had. What was quite interesting for starting Codepen is that you haven't talked about investors at all. So the question is, have you raised any money from the beginning on? And if yes, what is the role the investor plays in this journey? And if no, was that a choice or you didn't need it at all?
Okay. Yeah, so we actually did raise money. We didn't raise money for the first 3 years of Codepen's life. And what ended up happening is we weren't considering raising money, but the founders of Wufu were very good friends of ours. And we ended up talking, and one thing led to another, and we started just kind of talking about maybe taking on an investment from them. So we ended up raising $1 million from our friends, who also were people that I used to work for and learned quite a bit from. And so after 3 years of running Codepen, we said, you know, we have really big goals for Codepen. We think that by taking money, we could accelerate, get to that goal quicker, and build a much better version of Codepen. So we ended up taking that $1 million. And it's interesting because I was always very proud, before I took the money, of not having taken money, right? I was really proud of the fact that we grew this thing from the very beginning with our own money. The first thing we did when we started the company was we all just put $1,000 into a bank account, you know? Which wasn't very much money. It was just enough to like have a checking account over in the States. So we took that money, and I'm, in retrospect, really happy we did, because of what it did to our perspective and what it did to the company. So the first thing is we had the ability to hire other developers and get more help. At that point, Codepen had grown to the point where we had to do all the customer support, we had to fix all the bugs, and we spent so much time dealing with that that it really slowed us down and as far as making it better, right? So when we took the money, we were able to hire help to help us with like triaging like all the bugs and answering people's questions and things like that. The second thing it did is it made us a lot more focused, because all of a sudden we took someone's money, and we didn't just take someone's money, we took like friends' money, right? Which is like a double whammy. It's like, these guys are people I really respect and I really care for, and they trusted us with their money. And so it made us very focused about what we do, and it changed our behavior as far as we had to become more professional. We had to become more focused. And those lessons took time after we took the money. You know, we report to our investors every 3 months, not because they require it, but because we like to let them know what we're doing with the money that we raised. And so it was very stressful, but it helped us learn what it meant to run a business more than before. We were just like, oh, well, how much do we get paid? We're like, how much did we make? I don't know. Like, let's cover the cost, and then we make whatever is left over. That's kind of how we ran the company, which was fine. But all of a sudden, when you take money, we weren't very comfortable spending money that we didn't have, right? So we were trying to conserve as much of that as possible. Like, we didn't get offices, we didn't get fancy anything. We spent it on hiring people that we thought were very good. And we're very lucky to have Dee here, who she also works at Codepen. She does a ton of things. She's a coder, she does our finances, and she keeps us honest about what we're doing and what we're spending money on. So it's interesting because I've always heard arguments for and against taking money, and I was always like really proud, like, wow, this is awesome, we did it ourselves. But what money gets you is it makes you have to be more responsible, 100%, and then on top of that, it saves you time in that if you want to make it if you want to get your product to a certain place, it's going to accelerate that. But it's also going to be a lot more stressful, right? And so we wanted a balance of like making sure that we got the right amount of stress, but not too much, right? By taking on these investors, we didn't get investors who are like, spend this money as soon as possible because I want to know if you're going to make it or not, right? In Silicon Valley, you can take money from many different organizations, and how they're going to handle it is very different. You're going to maybe get $1 million, but they're going to want you to spend that $1 million within 9 months because they want to know if they should be spending time on you or if they should just move on to another company, right? And so we took money in a situation where we still kind of retained a lot of the control, but it focused us, but it didn't force us to spend that, right? So when we found ourselves in that situation, that's why we agreed to take the money. And so I'm super happy we did, and we've been lucky enough to meet our goals, but sadly, there's always another goal, right? Like it's always like, okay, great, you made this goal, now what's your next goal, right? So, but that's kind of what you sign up for, right? Like you're either growing the company or you're kind of not, things are going bad, which sucks. So it's like, I'd rather have the stress of like companies growing, got to make sure we, do things right, than to just have a company that just is like kind of okay. And that's very personal for everybody. It's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep it small and earn your money? I think you can do that for as long as you want. Or do you want to kind of grow the company? And we're never going to be like a 200-person company. I don't think that's where Codepen's ever going to go. But if we're a 20-person company, I'd be very happy. Right now we're 8. So that's kind of like our story of having taken money. It was one of the interesting things is I looked up some information around that because I was kind of looking up the history of Codepen. We have this podcast called Codepen Radio, and we talk a lot about everything that's happening at the company, including what we did with the money when we just took it, what we were thinking about it. And that's something that I feel like if you're interested in that route, you can learn a lot there. And one of the things that we did at Codepen Radio is we also talked to 10 other small businesses that also took money and kind of got their perspective. Like, did they take money? Did they not take money? What do they do with the money? You know, it really gives you like the business side of things. Like, you know, now that you have this service, how do you run it? How do you like make money off of it? So if you're interested in that route, I definitely would encourage you to like search for it.
We have other question? He was first, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alex, for coming. What my question is, in the right beginning, how did you know what are the things you do? What are the important things? What were your priorities, and how did you prioritize?
Yeah, so I would say in the beginning, when we first started, we did a lot of things based off of feedback from people using the site. Because Chris Coyier has such a large following, we really benefited from that. Like people, we were able to get the word out about what new features we added, and then we would get a lot of feedback. People would say, okay, like I like that you do this, but could you do this? You know, like whenever a new language pops up that people want, you know, like people wanted to support less, so we added less. People wanted to support Babel, so we add that, right? And so now we kind of have to keep a balance on, do we do something that just is for making money, or do we do something that everyone in Codepen can benefit from? And so I have to tell you, it's the most difficult decision to make because you never know if you're right? Because the only way you would know if you're right is if you could make both decisions and compare, which you can't, right? You're always going to be limited by your resources. So the biggest time waster you will ever have when you're running your business and you're the tech guy who can decide what you build next is building the wrong thing. And sadly, you will not know until you build that thing, right? And it's really difficult. So I think I know what I'm doing because I've been in tech making websites for a long time. I don't know what I'm doing. That's what I know, you know, it's like, I know that I should measure more. I know I should get more feedback from users. And I think a big part of it is build things as cheaply and quickly as possible so that you can find out if that thing is gonna work, you know? Again, that is why using a rapid prototyping tool, a real tool like Rails is amazing because you can build things really quickly. One of the things that I got to do when I was at Wufoo is I got to visit Y Combinator. And the guy who started TripAdvisor used to use this test called the 404 test, right? And so they did the cheapest test I've ever heard of. And the 404 test is, if you are thinking about building a feature and you have people already coming on your website, he would build a link to the new feature. He wouldn't even build the feature, right? So like, imagine that you have a website for travel and you're thinking about creating a booking system for like local entertainment events, right? He wouldn't build that. He would build a link that said, book local entertainment event here, right? And if he got enough clicks on that link, he knew that he should build that feature, right? And so that's a really smart way to figure out what the heck you're supposed to build, because it's really smart in that he didn't trust himself to say, okay, I think we should build this. And I think as a product guy, I make the big mistake of thinking I do know, right? I'm like, oh, I know what people want. Like, I don't, you know? And so trying to build things out, trying to get feedback from people is huge, because you're truly never going to know what was the right thing to do, you know? Otherwise, we would have all built Facebook, like in 2004, you know?
Thank you. Other question?
Hey Alex, thank you for sharing your story with us. I actually use Codepen and I love it.
Oh, cool.
But using it, I always had the feeling that it was a much bigger team. I don't know, I imagine like hundreds of people behind it.
Yeah.
And I had no idea it was built on Rails.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, it piques my curiosity. What are some of the technical challenges you guys ever have faced in the past? And what sort of stuff are you guys facing right now?
Yeah, so Oh, I appreciate that you think it's a much bigger team. That's part of the amazing thing about the internet is no one knows how small you are. So when you're 3 guys in someone's attic, no one has any idea. One of the things that we did when we started Codepen is we weren't working on it full time, and we had a meeting with another guy in Silicon Valley who had raised $12 million, and he asked us to do a lunch meeting for I don't know what reason, and we invited him to our lunch during our workday, and he was looking for our office, and we were just at like the local like pub, you know. So it's part of the amazing thing about creating a tech company is literally nobody knows how big you are. But as far as tech is concerned, the most difficult thing I'd say about Codepen is all the crazy security issues that we have. Unlike almost everything that you read is like, don't ever let anyone run JavaScript on your website. We are a website where you explicitly run JavaScript on our website, right? That's our goal, is that you bring your JavaScript to us. And so having to deal with all those security issues and having to run that code, compile that code quickly has always been this huge challenge. On top of that, everyone that comes to your website knows how to write a script. So when they find a security hole, they will mess with you for whatever reason. You know, we used to expose like an ID for a pen, and whenever you wanted to heart a pen, you would just send in the ID and your user ID, right? So someone's like, oh, perfect, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna heart like 1 million pens, right? Which is also gonna send an email to every single developer on Codepen, because that's another thing that we used to do. And so those security issues are the kind of things that where you go, okay, let me read about security, because I didn't know you could do that. I'm not a hacker. So I've had to learn about all the security issues. And you know, when we first started Codepen, we ran on 1 server. Everything was insanely insecure. I think today we're probably up to like 60-something servers, maybe, I don't know, like 90, some ridiculous number. It's not because of performance, it's because we spread everything out. So you have like the secure zone, and then you have like the insecure zone where it's like, that's our code, and we know it's our code. But just having to do things like that is more complicated, makes everything we do so much more complicated. It's just having to deal with those security issues, and then finding out that someone exploited it, so then you have to go become like the security researcher. But yeah, I would say that's just something we'll always deal with. At this point, we feel like we have it under control, but it's until the next fire turns up, and next thing you know, that's what you're doing. So, yeah.
Do you guys have other questions? Don't miss the opportunity. We have a superhero here, huh? Another one.
More about like the customer feedback, as you were saying that when you focus on this, it's actually really important. What will be your best advice to have the most efficient way to get all these customer advice feedback? And is it more online, or are you targeting something that's more like face-to-face with focus groups, or?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I guess part of it is you have to go wherever your customers go. So for us, developers are just on Twitter. They've always been on Twitter, and they will tell you whatever they need to tell you on Twitter. So it's like we would prefer to be able to answer questions over email, because that way we can write something that's longer than 140 characters. So we've always kind of just gone to where they are. At this point, we use a system called Front, and it basically takes everything from Twitter, Facebook, I don't know, whatever social media stuff is out there, and it aggregates it. So I like having that, but I would say as far as like collecting feedback, in the beginning, you want to encourage that as much as possible. You want them to tell you, because like you're always going to be in this weird bubble where in your mind, it's obvious what the user should do. You're like, no, just find the settings, click on the second tab, and save your pen. Like, that's obvious, right? And you're in that weird bubble, and you'll never have their perspective. So in the beginning, we just always had a contact form, always tried to reply to them over email or Twitter, and we basically do as much as we can to help them help themselves. But when you're starting out, just be that human that can actually respond to questions. One of the best things I think I learned at working at Wufoo was how important customer service was, right? Like everyone at Wufoo did customer service through email, like every developer is basically, right? So, and we do that at Codepen, where if you're a developer, you need to talk to the people that you're making software for, right? It can't just be like someone telling you, be like, hey, they don't know where button to click. And then you're on the other side going, click the second button, like it's obvious, right? But when you actually have to help those people yourself directly, you realize, okay, this is a person that is super frustrated, they're angry, and I built something that's stupid. So I think in the beginning, you want to ask them to give you feedback as much as possible because it'll help you build a much better product.
Cool. We got other 2 questions actually.
How do you discuss how you're going to implement it between your team of 8? How do you just do you sit down and then discuss methods, or do you kind of go on what the customer has said to you in the feedback?
As far as methods, I mean, the cool thing is that we're developers building for developers, so we have opinions about how it should be built, but we also try to get as many opinions as possible, right? Like, I think your goal is to distill what those users really want, and you have this like vision for it, but you also need to get as many opinions as possible, right? Because the more opinions you can have, and the better you are at like figuring out like what they're really telling you, you know? Like that's kind of like where that magic like leap happens, where you go like, I hate charging my Walkman and it sucks and I wish I could put more songs in it, and then somebody goes, oh, you want an iPod? You're like, what? You know? So you want to have that leap of, you know, merging like what you know about tech versus what everyone's, like the problem that they're having, you know? And so we try to do that as best we can. Again, it's one of those things where it's hard. It's like this just, I can't even tell you how it happens, and I can't even tell you that I know we're not the best at it, but we're trying our best, right? So we try to get, right now, the way we do things is we just really do try to get people into kind of like a beta. You know, once we all agree, okay, this is what we're gonna do, because we've had a lot of requests for that, or we just, through working on Codepen, like right now we have probably like 3 years worth of things that we want to do, right? And we kind of set that direction, go, this is where we're going with Codepen. As far as doing it with technology and stuff, we use tried and true technology. It's like you want to use what your team knows so you can build that thing as quickly as possible and have it be as stable as possible. Like we don't just have a developer go, oh, I want to use React. Like, no, that's like a team decision, you know? And it's not a me decision. It's not a founder decision. It's something where you go, what do we, like, where are we going with this? Like, we just added the project that I showed on Codepen. Like, if you see this is just jQuery, Rails, all that stuff. But the projects piece that I showed you where you can publish an entire website, that's actually a React app, right? So we're like slowly moving to React, but it's after a lot of discussion and a lot of confusion. It took us a whole year to build that thing after we built the pen editor. So we all knew how to build like an editor, right? But we didn't know how to use React. And so try to use the most boring, simple technology you can, because that way you can just build it very quickly.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Guys, time for the last question. Mohamed?
Like when you work in a team, sometimes it can be hard to make decisions. Like one person has an opinion who wants to build this feature, and then the other person doesn't agree with it. Like have you had any team issues, major ones specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's super hard, right? Because after 5 years working on this, I actually have really strong opinions about everything. Like you ask me something, I'll be like, oh yeah, I think it should be this way. And everybody else at Codepen does too. If you're a founder, if you're an employee, it doesn't matter. You have probably pretty strong opinions about it. we have places where I feel like we allow someone to, in a way, like someone's opinion to win out on this, right? So Chris Coy, he does a lot of speaking. He talks to a lot of people out in the community. He's always doing presentations. He creates tons of demos on Codepen. If there's something kind of like social media related or something about like how people communicate and share on Codepen, his opinion kind of tends to win out just because like I know I have to like respect the fact that he has like a really unique skill set that I don't have, you know? If there's something in the back end, like how we now have to run stuff on Docker and all this other crap, Tim, he's our ops guy. He's also a coder, but he's also our ops guy. He's gonna win that argument. Like, I'm gonna be like, well, I think we should use, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, but I'm the ops guy, so like, whatever. You know, and it's like, I'm lucky enough, you have to at some point have the argument, make your argument heard, and make sure that people are willing to let their ego go, right? Like, there's been plenty of times where I was like, well, I think we should have done, you know, X. But at the same time, if your team doesn't move cohesively, the team is more important than your opinion, right? And so one of the things that I do, this is, I wouldn't say it's sneaky because I tell them I do it, is I try to influence them before I ever bring it up, right? And so I start talking to my co-founders, to the team, about the things I'm interested in now for the things that we're gonna build in 9 to 12 months, right? I go, hey, you know what's amazing? This is amazing. It would be better if we did this. And you have to just learn to repeat yourself, and you have to sell to your team, right? Because you're not a single co-founder, or you're not a single founder of a team. And even with the team, you're not gonna push the team. It doesn't matter that you're the founder, right? You still need other people to help you build the thing that you're building. So the thing I've tried to do is go, if I want something really bad, I start thinking about it way beforehand, and I start communicating that to other people. And if I can get other people to buy into that, then in 9 months, we're building that thing, hopefully, right? And so to me, it's just more of a matter of communication, because the thing that I certainly won't do is I won't mess up the team. I'm not gonna be like, well, bump this. I'm not building that. No way, hands down, right? Because I still just want us to be like a really happy company, and I don't want to be miserable coming to work every day, right? It's like, it would be a tragedy if I go work for myself and then I hate everybody at work. You're like, you picked everyone to be here, you know? So you have to just, communication is huge. You know, make sure that you're communicating your ideas. Maybe they don't understand what you're saying. Maybe you need to build a small demo. Maybe just your idea isn't gonna happen now, but it can happen in the future, right? But at the end of the day, it's just go like, what's good for Codepen? Sometimes, even though you think that feature might be better for Codepen, it's not better for the team at Codepen. So if the team just agrees this is what we want to do collectively, we've been very lucky to just kind of put forth like the general happiness and communication of the team, because otherwise it kind of sucks, you know? It's like we're too small to hate each other, you know? We're just a small company. We have to talk to each other. We have to build things together. So we try to put that forth as much as possible. But I mean, I've had times where I just like, I blow my top. Luckily, we're all remote, so I get to like just walk outside, you know? And then you come back the next day and you don't even know why you're that upset. So it's managing your emotions and making sure you're communicating ideas is key. You know, it's part of what you'll do. As it doesn't matter if you're just by yourself or you're building it with a bunch of other people.
How easy is it to adopt a different technology? Because like in my mind, it would be hard to like switch from a language that you already know, just to learn a new one and to use a different framework.
So as far as like adapting a new technology, like, you know, we were lucky enough at that point, like we probably all knew like 4 to 5 different languages. So at that point, adding that other language, it seems pretty easy because you already have like the mental framework for it. So that's kind of like why we chose to do that. We chose to be like, all right, let's see what this is like. But as far as like deeply knowing a language, I would say that it probably takes you a good 6 months before you get really, really comfortable and you know like the caveats. Like the first thing that we did with Codepen is we actually wrote it with Sinatra. And we were like, okay, that got insane really quickly because there's only so much we could do with that as far as organization's concerned. That was like 3 months of development. 3 months of development, you're porting it over to Rails. And then trying to get comfortable with that. And so as far as like where I feel like, okay, I've hit my stride, I no longer just think about the technology, I can build with the technology and not have to focus on all the issues. I'd say it's like 6 months for me personally, where I go, I truly feel like I know this technology. So it's like be ready for a setback for a little bit, but I also like, I love using the right tool for the right job. Like I love that I can use Python if I need it, or JavaScript, or PHP if I need it, which I don't. But you know, like Ruby's great until it's not, and then be ready for a little bit of a setback. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be productive for 6 months. It just means that you're going to be like 70% as productive, you know?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are at the end of this interview, but before closing, I would like to thank you, Alex. It was amazing, and it was my honor to interview you. Thank you so much.